Bola had always lived a simple life in the bustling town of Ogbomoso. He was a trader at the local market, selling fruits and vegetables. His stall wasn't the biggest or the most profitable, but it provided enough to put food on the table for his family. Bola's wife, Tola, was a hard-working woman who supported him in everything he did, and together they raised their 2 children, Sade and Kunle. Life was hard, but Bola was content. He wasn't a man who dreamed of riches or luxury, but one day, fate handed him something that would change his life forever. On a typical sunny afternoon, Bola was closing his store when he noticed a small, worn leather bag lying in the alley behind the market. At first, he thought nothing of it, probably something a careless shopper had dropped. But something about the bag caught his attention. He picked it up and was startled by the weight. Curiosity piqued. Bola opened the bag and gasped at what he saw inside. The bag was stuffed full of money, thousands of dollars, more than Bola had ever seen in his life. His hands trembled as he held the bag. This kind of money could change everything. It could pay for Sade and Kunle's school fees, fix the roof of their small house, and give his family the kind of life they had only dreamed of. But as the initial excitement wore off, Bola's mind began to race with questions. Whose money was this? How did it end up here? And, more importantly, what should he do with it? Bola hurried home, his heart pounding in his chest as he clutched the bag tightly under his arm. He had always been an honest man, but this was a temptation like no other. The thought of handing the money over to the police crossed his mind. But what if the money belonged to dangerous people? What if it was never claimed, and the police decided to keep it for themselves? When he got home, Tola was already preparing dinner. She greeted him with her usual warm smile, but Bola's mind was elsewhere. He didn't tell her about the bag right away. Instead, he hid it under the bed in their small bedroom, unable to decide what to do. That night, Bola barely slept. His mind was filled with visions of what the money could do for his family, but also with fear. He knew that money like this didn't just fall from the sky without consequences. The next morning, Bola couldn't keep the secret any longer. He sat Tola down and told her everything. Tola's eyes widened in shock as Bola showed her the money. "Bola, this is a blessing from God," she exclaimed. "We've struggled for so long, and now finally we can have the life we deserve." But Bola wasn't so sure. "Tola, what if this money belongs to someone dangerous? What if it's stolen? We could get into serious trouble." Tola frowned, her excitement fading as she realized the gravity of the situation. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. Bola didn't have an answer. He spent the next few days wrestling with his conscience. On one hand, the money could solve all of their problems, but on the other hand, it could bring trouble to their door. He considered taking the money to the police, but the thought of losing it made his heart sink. As the days passed, Bola began to notice strange things. Men he didn't recognize started hanging around the market, watching him from a distance. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. One evening, as Bola was closing up his stall, a man approached him. He was tall, with a scar running down the side of his face, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening," the man said smoothly. "I hear you've come into some money recently, a very large sum of money." Bola's blood ran cold. How did this man know about the money? Bola tried to play dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice shaking slightly. The man's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "I think you do, Bola. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. You have something that doesn't belong to you, and it's time to give it back." Bola's heart pounded in his chest. He knew now that the money belonged to dangerous people, and he had made a terrible mistake by keeping it. The man stepped closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "You have 2 days to return the money. If you don't, things will get unpleasant." With that, the man turned and walked away, leaving Bola standing in the market, shaken and terrified. Bola rushed home and told Tola what had happened. Fear gripped both of them as they realized the danger they were in. "We have to return the money," Bola said urgently. "These people won't stop until they get what's theirs." Tola nodded, her face pale with fear. The next day, Bola took the bag of money and set out to find the man who had threatened him. He didn't know who the man was or where to find him, but he knew he had to try. As he wandered through the market, his eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the man. Hours passed, and Bola began to feel hopeless. Just as he was about to give up, he saw the scar-faced man standing in the shadows near a row of stalls. Bola's heart pounded as he approached the man, the bag of money clutched tightly in his hands. "Here," Bola said, holding out the bag. "Take it. I don't want any trouble." The man looked down at the bag, then back up at Bola. "Smart choice," he said, taking the bag from Bola's hands. "But remember, Bola, we don't forget those who try to cross us." With that, the man disappeared into the crowd, leaving Bola standing there, shaken but relieved. Bola returned home, exhausted and emotionally drained. He had given the money back, but the fear still lingered. What if the men came after him anyway? What if they didn't believe that he had returned all of the money? Tola tried to comfort him, but Bola couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in danger. Over the next few weeks, Bola noticed more strange things. Cars he didn't recognize would park outside their house at odd hours, and he often felt like he was being followed when he went to the market. The fear gnawed at him, but there was little he could do. One evening, as Bola and Tola sat in their small living room, there was a knock at the door. Bola's heart raced as he opened the door to find the scar-faced man standing there once again. "We have a problem," the man said, stepping into the house without being invited. "The money you returned? It's not all there." Bola's heart sank. "I swear that's all I found," he protested. The man's expression hardened. "You're lying, Bola. We know how much was in that bag, and you've only given us half. If you don't return the rest, your family will pay the price." Terror gripped Bola as the man's words sank in. He had no idea where the rest of the money was. He had only found one bag. How could he possibly return something he didn't have? But the man's threat was real, and Bola knew that his family's lives were at stake. Bola tried to explain that he didn't have the rest of the money, but the man wouldn't listen. "You have 1 week," the man said coldly. "Find the rest of the money, or your family will suffer the consequences." With that, he turned and left, leaving Bola and Tola in stunned silence. Bola's mind raced. What was he going to do? He had no idea where the rest of the money was, and now his family's safety was on the line. He couldn't go to the police. These men were too dangerous, and going to the authorities would only make things worse. Over the next few days, Bola desperately searched for any clues about the missing money. He retraced his steps, revisited the market, and asked discreet questions, but no one seemed to know anything about the bag or its origins. As the deadline approached, Bola grew increasingly frantic. He couldn't eat or sleep, consumed by the fear that something terrible was going to happen to his family. Tola tried to stay strong, but she too was terrified. The strain on their marriage was growing, and the once close-knit family began to feel the cracks of fear and desperation. On the evening of the final day, just as the sun was setting, there was another knock at the door. Bola's heart raced as he opened it, expecting to see the scar-faced man. But this time, it wasn't the man. It was his 2 children, Said and Kunle, standing on the doorstep, their faces pale with fear. Bola quickly pulled them inside, his heart pounding in his chest. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice shaking. Said, the eldest, spoke up. "Papa, some men were following us on our way home from school. They kept asking us where we lived." Bola's blood ran cold. The men had found his children. The fear that had been gnawing at him for weeks now became a full-blown terror. He had to protect his family, but he didn't know how. That night, Bola made a decision. He couldn't wait for the men to come after them. He had to take matters into his own hands. He would confront the scar-faced man and try to negotiate. It was risky, but it was the only option he had left. Early the next morning, Bola left the house, determined to find the man who had been terrorizing his family. He knew that the market was the best place to start, so he headed there first. As he walked through the crowded stalls, his eyes scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of the man. Hours passed, and Bola began to lose hope. Just as he was about to leave, he spotted the scar-faced man standing in the shadows near a food stall. Bola's heart raced as he approached the man, his palms sweaty with fear. "We need to talk," Bola said, his voice barely above a whisper. The man looked at him with a mixture of amusement and irritation. "You've had your chance, Bola. It's too late now." Bola's stomach dropped. "Please," he begged. "I don't have the rest of the money. I never did. But I'll do anything to protect my family." The man's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "There is one thing you could do," he said slowly, "but it's risky." Bola's heart pounded in his chest. "What is it?" The man leaned in closer, his voice low and menacing. "We have a job for you. Complete it, and your debt will be forgiven. Fail, and your family will pay the price." Bola's mind raced. He didn't want to get involved with these men any more than he already was. But he had no choice. He had to protect his family, no matter the cost. "What kind of job?" Bola asked, his voice shaking. The man smiled, his teeth gleaming in the dim light. "We'll be in touch." For the next few days, Bola lived in a state of constant anxiety, waiting for the call that would change his life forever. When it finally came, the instructions were clear. Bola was to deliver a package to a location on the outskirts of Ogbomoso. He didn't know what was inside the package, and he didn't want to know. All he cared about was completing the job and keeping his family safe. The day of the delivery arrived, and Bola's heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to the designated location. The package felt heavy in his hands, a constant reminder of the dangerous game he was playing. When he arrived at the location, a man was waiting for him, tall, muscular, and with an air of authority that made Bola's stomach churn. The man took the package without a word, his eyes cold and calculating. "Good," he said after a moment. "You've done well." Bola felt a brief sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The man's next words sent a chill down his spine. "This is just the beginning, Bola. You work for us now." Bola's blood ran cold. He had thought that completing the job would be the end of it, but now he realized that he had only dug himself deeper into a dangerous world he didn't understand. Over the next few weeks, Bola found himself drawn further and further into the criminal world he had inadvertently become a part of. The men would contact him sporadically, asking him to run errands or deliver packages, each job more dangerous than the last. Bola knew that he was in too deep, but he couldn't find a way out. The men had made it clear that his family's safety depended on his cooperation. The weight of his double life began to take its toll on Bola. He became distant from Tola and the children, consumed by the fear and guilt that gnawed at him constantly. Tola noticed the change in him and confronted him one evening. "Bola, what's going on? You're not yourself anymore. You're always on edge, and I feel like you're hiding something from me." Bola's heart ached as he looked into his wife's concerned eyes. He wanted to tell her everything, but he knew that doing so would only put her in more danger. "It's nothing, Tola," he said, forcing a smile. "Just stress from work." Tola wasn't convinced, but she didn't press the issue. She could sense that something was deeply wrong, but she trusted Bola to tell her the truth when he was ready. As the weeks passed, the jobs became more dangerous, and Bola's fear grew. He knew that he couldn't keep living like this, but he didn't see a way out. The men were ruthless, and any attempt to leave would surely result in his family being harmed. One evening, after completing another dangerous job, Bola returned home to find a letter waiting for him on the kitchen table. The envelope was plain, with no return address, but Bola's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chilling message. "We're watching you. Don't even think about running." Bola's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the message sank in. He was trapped, and there was no way out. Bola's mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. He couldn't keep working for these men, but he couldn't risk putting his family in danger either. He needed help, but who could he trust? The police were out of the question. He had been involved in too many illegal activities, and going to them would only incriminate him further. That night, Bola lay awake in bed, his mind spinning with fear and uncertainty. He knew that he couldn't keep living like this, but every option seemed to lead to disaster. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Bola made a decision. He would turn over the evidence he had gathered to the authorities the next day. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to protect his family and free himself from the criminal world he had become entangled in. The next morning, Bola set his plan in motion. He contacted a trusted police officer, Officer Ade, and arranged to meet him in secret. Bola handed over the evidence he had collected, explaining the situation and the danger he and his family were in. Bola explained that a man called Ease is the leader of this dangerous network. Officer Ade listened carefully, his expression grim. "You're doing the right thing, Bola," he said, "but this won't be easy. Mr. Ease has powerful connections, and he won't go down without a fight." Bola nodded, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. A few days later, Officer Ade and his team conducted a raid on one of Mr. Ease's key operations. It was a carefully planned mission, and Bola held his breath as he waited for news. The raid was a success. Several of Easy's associates were arrested, and crucial evidence was seized. But Easy himself managed to slip away. Bola knew that Easy wouldn't give up easily. The man was dangerous, and now that his operation had been exposed, he would be more desperate than ever. Bola and his family were still in danger, but at least they had made a dent in Easy's empire. The fallout from the raid was swift. News of the arrest spread quickly, and Easy's associates were scrambling to cover their tracks. Bola kept a low profile, knowing that his role in the investigation had to remain secret. But despite the success of the raid, Bola couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. Tola sensed Bola's unease and confronted him again. "Bola, I know something's going on. Please, just tell me the truth." Bola hesitated but finally decided that she deserved to know. He told her everything: the money, the threats, the deal with Easy, and his decision to turn over the evidence. Tola was shocked, but she understood why Bola had done what he did. As Bola and Tola discussed the situation, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Bola's heart raced as he opened the door to find one of Officer Ade's men standing there. "We need to talk," the officer said, his face serious. The officer revealed that despite the raid's success, there was evidence that someone in the police force had been feeding information to Ease. "We have a leak, and it's putting the investigation at risk," the officer explained. Bola felt a surge of fear. If Ezzy had someone on the inside, they were all in even greater danger than he had realized. Bola couldn't believe it. Someone in the police force was working with Ez. The revelation shook him to his core. He had trusted Officer Aid and his team, but now he didn't know who he could trust. Was the entire operation compromised? Was he being watched even now? As Bola grappled with the betrayal, Tola stood by his side, offering him support. "We'll get through this, Bola," she said, though her voice trembled with fear. Bola appreciated her strength, but he knew that their situation was more precarious than ever. They had to be careful. One wrong move could be their last. With the knowledge that Eze had a mole in the police force, Bola knew that time was running out. He had to find a way to protect his family before Eze struck back. Officer Ade assured Bola that they were working to identify the mole, but Bola wasn't convinced that they would find the leak in time. Bola and Tola made plans to leave Ogbomoso for a while, hoping to lay low until the situation was resolved. But as they prepared to leave, Bola received an ominous message from an unknown number. The message simply read, "You can't run forever." Bola's heart sank. Ease was still watching them. Bola knew that running wasn't an option anymore. They had to confront the situation head-on. With Officer Ada's help, Bola set a trap for Eze. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way to bring him down once and for all. The plan involved setting up a fake meeting, where Eze would think he was making a deal with one of his associates. Instead, Officer Aid and his team would be waiting to arrest him. Bola knew that the plan could backfire, but he had no other choice. It was time to take the final move against Eze. The day of the meeting arrived, and Bola's nerves were on edge. He had agreed to act as the bait in the trap, and as he waited for Eze to arrive, his heart pounded in his chest. The location was a remote warehouse on the outskirts of Ogbomoso, and Officer Ade's team was stationed nearby, ready to move in at the right moment. As the minutes ticked by, Bola wondered if Ezzy would even show up. But just as he was about to lose hope, a sleek black car pulled up outside the warehouse. Bola held his breath as Ezzy stepped out, flanked by two of his men. Ezzy entered the warehouse, his eyes scanning the room suspiciously. "Bola," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "I have to admit, I'm surprised you'd agree to meet with me after everything that's happened." Bola tried to keep his voice steady as he replied, "We both know this needs to end, Eze. It's gone too far." Eze chuckled darkly. "Oh, I agree, but I'm not the one who's going to end it." As Eze stepped closer, Bola signaled to Officer Aid's team who were waiting just outside. In an instant, Officer Aid's team stormed the warehouse, surrounding Eze and his men. Eze's face twisted with rage as he realized he had been set up. "You think you can do this to me?" he spat, his voice dripping with venom. As Officer Aid's team moved in, chaos erupted. Easy's men tried to resist, but they were quickly overpowered by the well-trained officers. Bola stood frozen in the center of the room, watching as everything unfolded around him. He could hardly believe it. After months of living in fear, after being dragged deeper into a world of crime and danger, the nightmare was finally coming to an end. Easy was furious, shouting threats at Bola and the officers as they handcuffed him. "You'll pay for this, Bola," he snarled. "You think this is over? It's not. I have people everywhere. You and your family will never be safe." Bola's heart raced as he listened to Easy's words. Even now, as Easy was being taken down, the fear of retaliation still loomed over him. But Officer Aid placed a reassuring hand on Bola's shoulder. "We'll make sure he doesn't get the chance to hurt you or your family again," Officer Aid said firmly. "You've done the right thing, Bola. The case against Easy is strong, and with the evidence we've gathered, he won't be able to escape this time." Bola nodded, though the tension in his chest didn't fully dissipate. He had done what was necessary to protect his family, But the danger still felt too close. For now, though, the immediate threat had been dealt with, and Ease was in custody. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath of Easy's arrest unfolded in Ogbomoso. News of the crime lord's downfall spread through the community like wildfire. Many of Easy's associates had been arrested during the raid, and those who remained were scrambling to distance themselves from his empire. Bola tried to return to a sense of normalcy, though it wasn't easy. The fear that had consumed him for so long still lingered in the back of his mind. Tola, ever supportive, stood by Bola's side through it all. She had been shaken by the revelations of Bola's involvement with Eze's criminal network, but she understood why he had made the decisions he did. Together, they focused on moving forward, rebuilding their life, and ensuring that their family remained safe. One evening, as Bola sat with Tola in their home, he reflected on the events that had transpired. The money he had found in the market, the bag that had seemed like a blessing at first, had brought nothing but hardship and danger. He had learned a valuable lesson about the price of wealth and the consequences of making the wrong choices. No amount of money was worth risking the safety of his family. "Are you okay, Bola?" Tola asked softly, breaking the silence. Bola looked at his wife, feeling the weight of the past few months lift slightly from his shoulders. "I'm okay now," he said quietly. "I just wish I hadn't gotten us involved in all of this in the first place. I thought I could fix everything on my own, but I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Tola smiled gently, placing her hand on his. "We can't change what happened, but we can move forward. We're together, and that's what matters." Bola nodded, grateful for Tola's unwavering support. She had been his anchor throughout this ordeal, and he knew that with her by his side, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The day of Eze's trial arrived, and Bola was called to testify. The courtroom was filled with people, lawyers, journalists, and curious onlookers eager to witness the trial of the man who had terrorized Ogbomoso for years. Eze sat in the defendant's chair, his eyes cold and calculating as he glared at Bola. Despite the gravity of the situation, Bola remained composed as he took the stand and recounted the events that led to Eze's arrest. The trial was tense, but the evidence against Eze was overwhelming. Officer Ada had done an excellent job building the case, and with Bola's testimony alongside other witnesses, it became clear that Eze's reign of terror was finally drawing to a close. The judge carefully considered all the evidence before delivering the final verdict. Eze was found guilty on multiple charges, including extortion, conspiracy, and organized crime. As the judge read the verdict aloud, Bola felt a wave of relief wash over him. Eze had been brought to justice, and the threat that had loomed over his family was finally lifted. In the days that followed, Bola and Tola worked to put their lives back together. The community, once fearful of Eze's influence, began to heal as well. Bola's role in bringing down the crime lord earned him a measure of respect among his neighbors, though he remained humble about his actions. He had simply done what he had to do to protect his family, and that was enough for him. Life in Ogbomoso gradually returned to normal. Bola went back to his work at the market, though this time he approached his business with a renewed sense of integrity. The lessons he had learned about wealth, greed, and the cost of making dangerous choices stayed with him, and he was determined to live a life of honesty and simplicity from then on. In the end, Bola knew that the true wealth in his life wasn't found in money or material possessions. It was found in the love of his family, the strength of his community, and the courage to stand up for what was right, even in the face of danger. And that was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. With Eze behind bars, peace slowly returned to Bola's life and the lives of those in Ogbomoso. Though the scars of the past remained, Bola and Tola found solace in the simplicity of their everyday lives. Their children thrived, and the weight that had once hung over their home lifted as the community healed from the grip of fear Isa had imposed for so long. Bola's return to the market wasn't without its challenges. Many people were curious about his involvement in Isa's downfall, and rumors had circulated about his close call with danger. But most of the community saw Bola as a hero, someone who had taken a stand against corruption and greed. It wasn't easy to adjust to this newfound attention, but Bola remained humble. He didn't see himself as a hero, just a man who had made mistakes and sought to right them. Tola continued to support Bola in every way. She had seen him through his darkest times, and now she stood proudly by his side as they worked to rebuild their lives. Together, they began to save what little money they earned, no longer tempted by the easy promises of wealth that had once led Bola down a dangerous path. They focused on the future, dreaming of a life where their children could grow up free from the fear and uncertainty that had once clouded their lives. One evening, as Bola and Tola sat on their front porch, watching the sunset over the rooftops of Ogbomoso, Tola turned to her husband with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said softly, "we've come a long way, Bola. There was a time when I didn't know if we'd make it through all of this, but here we are, stronger than ever." Bola nodded, taking her hand in his. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but we did it. Together." Tola smiled, leaning her head against Bola's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Bola. You stood up for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. And look at us now. We've built something real, something that no amount of money could ever buy." Bola squeezed her hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything they had been through. He knew that the challenges they had faced had tested them in ways they never could have imagined, but in the end, they had come out on the other side, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. In the years that followed, Bola and Tola continued to build their lives together. They invested in their children's education, ensuring that they would have opportunities that Bola had never dreamed of as a young boy growing up in poverty. Though they never became wealthy in the traditional sense, they found richness in their love, their family, and their community. Bola's story became one of quiet resilience, a tale of a man who had been tempted by greed but had ultimately chosen the path of integrity and justice. And though the money he had found all those years ago had caused him nothing but heartache, it had also taught him one of life's greatest lessons. True wealth was found not in material possessions, but in the strength of one's character, the love of family, and the courage to stand up for what was right.
Thank you so much for watching The Price of Greed, Bola's life-changing decision. We hope you found Bola's journey as gripping and thought-provoking as we did. This story highlights how one decision can shape the course of a life in unexpected ways. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more powerful African stories that dive into life's toughest choices, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest releases. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Bola's decision? Would you have chosen differently? Let us know in the comments. Your support keeps us inspired to share these incredible stories. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and stay tuned for more exciting content. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.